The rust-colored skies of Proxima be stretched endlessly above them as Ethan Blackwood adjusted his environmental suit for the third time in the last hour. The planet's thin atmosphere made his lungs work harder, even with the supplemental oxygen. But it wasn't the air that had him on edge. It was the woman beside him. Nilera Vex stood tall and elegant despite the harsh conditions, her silver-blue skin seeming to shimmer even under the dull light of Proxima Centauri. As an Australie, she required no assistance breathing in the atmosphere, one of many advantages her species had over humans. That fact alone might have been enough to create distance between them, but her cool demeanor and calculating gaze only widened the gap. Your constant fidgeting with your equipment suggests either poor Earthcom training or excessive anxiety, Blackwood, Nilera said, not bothering to look at him as she analyzed data on her holographic display. Neither quality is particularly reassuring in a security escort. Ethan resisted the urge to snap back. After 15 years as an Earthcom special operative before going private, he'd learned when to pick his battles. With respect, Director Vex, vigilance isn't anxiety. This mining outpost was abandoned under suspicious circumstances. It was abandoned because it became unprofitable, she replied dismissively. Astral Minerals doesn't maintain operations that fail to meet quarterly projections. The Proximians were compensated fairly for relocating. Your suspicious circumstances are merely the typical human tendency to seek narrative where there is only economics. Despite her condescension, Ethan couldn't help but notice the grace with which she moved, the precise efficiency of her gestures. Australia were known for their cold logic and emotional detachment, but there was something about Nilera that suggested depths beneath her icy exterior. Or perhaps that was just wishful thinking on his part. The mining complex loomed before them, a sprawling collection of prefabricated structures partially embedded in the rocky terrain. Most of the equipment had been stripped and transported off-world, leaving skeletal frameworks like the rib cages of massive beasts. The inspection shouldn't take more than 2 standard hours, Nilera said, activating the entry sequence on the main facility door. We'll verify the environmental remediation protocols, confirm the site has been properly decommissioned, and depart. Simple, efficient, and requiring minimal protection. She emphasized the last words with a pointed glance at the pulse rifle strapped to Ethan's back. Let's hope you're right, he murmured, positioning himself slightly ahead of her as the doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The interior was dark, emergency lighting casting everything in a dull red glow. Ethan's training immediately flagged several concerns. Power shouldn't still be running in an abandoned facility, and the air circulation systems were active despite the supposed shutdown. Director, I recommend we postpone this inspection until I can perform a proper security sweep. Nilera's iridescent eyes narrowed. Your job is to follow my directives, not issue your own. The board expects this report by tomorrow's transmission window, and I won't disappoint them because of human paranoia. She strode confidently into the main corridor, her slender form silhouetted against the emergency lights. Ethan followed, hand resting on his sidearm, every sense alert. The facility felt wrong, too quiet yet not empty enough, like a held breath. They reached the Central Operations Hub, a circular room lined with dormant monitoring stations. Nilera moved to the main console, her fingers dancing across the interface as she began downloading system logs. Curious, she muttered, the first hint of uncertainty in her voice. The environmental systems show manual overrides initiated after the official shutdown date. Ethan wasn't listening. His attention had fixed on a subtle movement in his peripheral vision, a shadow shifting where no shadow should be. In one fluid motion, he drew his weapon and pushed Nilera behind him. We're not alone, he whispered. The words had barely left his mouth when the room erupted in chaos. Figures emerged from concealed positions, their forms unmistakably Proximian, the native inhabitants supposedly long gone from this area. Their chitinous exoskeletons gleamed in the red light as they raised weapons that pulsed with stored energy. Astral thieves, one of them chittered in broken galactic standard. Pay for stealing our world. The first blast came without further warning, a searing beam of concentrated energy aimed directly at Nalara's chest. Ethan reacted purely on instinct, shoving her roughly aside and turning to shield her with his body. The laser struck him squarely between the shoulder blades, burning through his protective gear and into flesh. The pain was instantaneous and overwhelming, like being branded from the inside out. He heard Nalara cry out, in surprise rather than pain, as they both tumbled to the floor. Despite the agony radiating through his body, Ethan managed to raise his pulse rifle and return fire, creating a momentary barrier between them and their attackers. Exit route, he gasped, feeling warm blood spreading across his back. Right corridor, emergency blast doors, 50 meters. To his surprise, Nalara didn't argue. She gripped his arm with unexpected strength and helped him to his feet. Together they staggered toward the corridor, Ethan continuing to fire behind them with his free arm. "You took that blast from me," Nalara said, her voice tight with something that might have been shock or confusion. "Why would you do that?" Ethan didn't have breath to waste on explaining concepts like duty, instinct, or basic humanity. Later, he managed, wincing as each step sent fresh waves of pain through his body. "Call. Extraction team. Now." Nalara activated her wrist communicator, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Director Vex requesting immediate extraction. Security breach at Proxima Site 12. Officer down. Repeat, officer down." They reached the emergency doors, and Nalara quickly bypassed the security locks. As the massive doors began to close behind them, providing temporary safety, Ethan's knees finally buckled. The last thing he saw before consciousness slipped away was Nalara's face hovering above his, her features arranged in an expression he'd never seen on an Australia before: concern. Ethan awoke to the rhythmic beeping of medical equipment and the sterile smell of antiseptic. His body felt leaden, a dull ache replacing the searing pain he remembered. When he managed to focus his eyes, he was surprised to find Nalara sitting beside his bed, studying a medical display with intense concentration. "You're not dead," she stated matter-of-factly when she noticed he was awake, "though you very nearly achieved that state." Ethan attempted a smile, finding it required less effort than expected. "Sorry to disappoint. Where are we?" "The medical bay of the company transport vessel." Her tone shifted slightly. "The laser weapon damaged your peripheral nervous system and penetrated your left lung. The medical facilities here are inadequate for human physiology. Standard corporate cost-cutting," Ethan muttered. "Why invest in equipment for species that make up less than 5% of your workforce?" Indeed, Nalara's mouth thinned into a line. "The autodoc can keep you stable, but proper treatment requires Federation medical facilities." Ethan understood the implications immediately. "You'd have to divert the ship to New Darwin Station. Your bosses won't like that." "They would not," she agreed. "It would delay the mission by at least 48 hours and violate several corporate efficiency directives." Ethan closed his eyes, resigned. Corporate regulations were clear. Mission parameters took precedence over non-critical medical situations, and as long as he wasn't actively dying, Astral Minerals wouldn't authorize the detour. "I've already changed our course." His eyes snapped open in shock. "You what?" Nalara's expression remained impassive, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I concluded that your condition qualifies as critical, regardless of the autodoc assessment. We will reach New Darwin Station in approximately 7 hours." Ethan stared at her, searching for some explanation for this unprecedented breach of protocol. Australia, particularly those in corporate leadership, were notorious for their rigid adherence to rules and procedures. "Why?" he finally asked. Nalara seemed to consider her response carefully. "You intercepted a lethal blast meant for me. The logical response is to ensure your survival." She paused, her gaze dropping briefly to her hands. "Additionally, I find myself uncomfortable with the prospect of your death." Coming from an Australia, it was practically a declaration of devotion. Ethan felt a strange warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. "Well, He said, "Dying would definitely violate my contract, so thank you for the career assistance." For a moment, Ethan thought he saw the corners of Nalara's mouth twitch upward, an almost smile that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Over the next 7 hours, Nalara rarely left the medical bay. She monitored his vitals, adjusted medication levels, and even helped him shift positions when the pain from his back became too intense. For someone with no medical training, her care was remarkably effective and gentle. "I've been studying human physiology," she explained when he commented on it. "Since the incident, I've downloaded several medical texts from a ship's database. Fast reader, Australia process information more efficiently than humans." "Of course you do," Ethan chuckled, then winced as the movement pulled at his wounds. Nalara's hand shot out, steadying his shoulder with surprising warmth. "You should minimize unnecessary movement and speech." "What, no talking?" "That's the cruelest treatment yet." This time, the almost smile lingered a fraction longer. "Humans seem to derive comfort from verbal exchanges, even when they serve no practical purpose. If it aids your recovery, you may continue speaking. Your generosity knows no bounds, Director." As they approached New Darwin Station, Ethan noticed Nalara growing increasingly tense. The station was Federation territory, not corporate, which meant Astral Minerals' influence would be limited there. "You're going to face repercussions for this, aren't you?" he asked as medical personnel prepared to transfer him from the ship. Nalara's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something vulnerable in them. "Probable. The company values adherence to protocol above individual initiative." "Then why risk it?" She was silent for a long moment. "I'm beginning to question whether our protocols adequately account for certain values." "Like what?" "Like the worth of someone who would place themselves in harm's way for another." Her fingers briefly brushed against his. "Rest now. I'll handle the administrative complications." The next 2 weeks at New Darwin Station passed in a blur of surgical procedures and regenerative therapies. Ethan's injuries healed remarkably well, though the doctors warned he would carry scars and occasional nerve pain as permanent reminders of the encounter. To his surprise, Nalara remained on the station throughout his recovery. She'd explained it away as a practical necessity. She needed his official statement to complete her incident report, but Ethan suspected there was more to it than bureaucratic thoroughness. "The Proximian insurgents have been apprehended," she informed him one evening, sitting beside his bed with a datapad. "It appears they never left the planet, contrary to company records. They were living in the deep tunnel systems beneath the facility. So they were defending their home," Ethan mused. "They were violating a legally binding relocation agreement," Nalara countered, though without her usual conviction. "Have you ever been forced from your home, Nalara?" She looked up, startled by the personal question and the use of her first name rather than her title. "Australia do not form emotional attachments to locations. But you form attachments to something, don't you? Your work, your achievements, your status in the corporate hierarchy. Those are rational investments, not emotional attachments." Ethan smiled faintly. "Keep telling yourself that." To his amazement, instead of the dismissive response he expected, Nalara set down her datapad and met his gaze directly. "Your actions at the facility were irrational by any objective standard. You risked your life for mine without calculation or guarantee of personal benefit. It's called compassion, Nalara. Humans are pretty good at it when we try." Is that all it was? Compassion? The question hung in the air between them, laden with implications neither was quite ready to address. Ethan found himself studying the delicate patterns that traced across her silver-blue skin, the depth in her iridescent eyes. "Maybe not all," he admitted softly. Something changed between them after that conversation, a shift almost imperceptible to outsiders, but profound in its impact. Nalara began sharing meals with him, bringing interesting articles or station gossip to distract him during painful therapy sessions, even accompanying him on the short walks the doctors encouraged for his rehabilitation. One night, after a particularly grueling physical therapy session, Ethan found himself struggling with a wave of pain that medication couldn't quite touch. Nilera, seeing his distress, hesitated only briefly before placing her hand over his. Australia have certain abilities that aren't widely known outside our species, she said quietly. With your permission, I could help ease your discomfort. Ethan nodded, too exhausted to question the offer. Nilera closed her eyes, and gradually, he felt a cooling sensation spreading from her hand into his, like water flowing into parched earth. The pain didn't disappear entirely, but it receded to manageable levels. That's remarkable, he whispered when she finally withdrew her hand. Why isn't that common knowledge? Nilara's expression grew guarded. My people prefer to maintain certain advantages in our dealings with other species. Corporate policy strictly forbids using such abilities for non-Australia. Then why help me? I find myself making many exceptions where you're concerned, Ethan Blackwood. The admission seemed to surprise her as much as him. As his recovery progressed, they grew closer in ways neither had anticipated. Nilera began asking questions about human emotions, relationships, and perspectives, genuine curiosity replacing her former condescension. Ethan, in turn, discovered depths to the Australia that contradicted everything he'd been told about their coldly logical nature. They were walking along the station's observation deck, gazing out at the stars, when the first symptoms appeared. Nilera suddenly swayed, gripping the railing as a wave of dizziness overcame her. Are you all right? Ethan moved to steady her, concern etched on his features. A temporary imbalance, she insisted, though her normally perfect composure seemed fractured. Perhaps a reaction to the station's atmospheric calibration. But in the days that followed, more symptoms emerged: sensitivity to light, unexplained fatigue, subtle changes in her skin's luminescence. When Ethan finally convinced her to visit the station's medical bay, the diagnosis shocked them both. It's impossible, Nilera whispered, staring at the medical scan results. There must be an error in your equipment. The Federation doctor, a seasoned Tyrellian with experience across species, shook her head. I've run the analysis 3 times, Director Vex. The results are conclusive. You're pregnant. Ethan felt as though the artificial gravity had suddenly failed. That's not possible. Humans and Australia aren't compatible. Everyone knows that. Evidently, everyone is wrong, the doctor replied, gesturing to the scan that clearly showed a developing embryo. I can't explain how it happened, but there's no mistaking what we're seeing. When they were alone again, the silence between them seemed alive with unspoken questions and implications. Nilera sat perfectly still, her face unreadable even to Ethan, who had grown adept at interpreting her subtle expressions. I didn't know, she finally said, her voice barely audible. My species, we don't reproduce like yours. We have conception chambers, controlled genetic combinations. This shouldn't be possible. Ethan moved cautiously to sit beside her. Are you all right? Her eyes met his, filled with an emotion he couldn't quite name. I don't know. This violates everything I understand about our biology, about the order of things. Does it frighten you? Yes, she admitted, and the honesty of it seemed to surprise her. But not in the way I would have expected. Her hand moved unconsciously to rest on her abdomen. There is something compelling about the idea that we have created something unprecedented. Ethan covered her hand with his own. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Nilera studied their joined hands. The corporation will not share your sentiment. This will be viewed as a biological anomaly of considerable scientific interest. The implication was clear. Astral Minerals would consider both Nilera and the child valuable research subjects, not people with rights and choices. Then they don't need to know, Ethan said firmly. Not until we figure this out. But secrets were difficult to keep on a space station with constant health monitoring. Within days, the information had reached Astral Minerals' executive level, and their response was swift and unequivocal. Nilera was immediately relieved of her duties and ordered to report to the company's research facility on Proxima B. Ethan, having recovered sufficiently, was recalled to accompany her, ostensibly as security, but they both knew he would effectively be a prisoner as well. Director Thors, the coldly efficient head of Astral Minerals Innovation Division, met them personally upon their arrival at the research complex. This development has significant implications for interspecies relations and potential genetic engineering applications, he explained, leading them through sterile white corridors. Your cooperation will be amply rewarded. And if we choose not to cooperate? Ethan asked, his hand resting protectively near Nalaris. Thor smiled thinly. That will be most unfortunate for your career prospects, Blackwood. And for Director Vex, such a decision would constitute a breach of her lifetime employment contract, activating several rather severe penalty clauses. Their living quarters, though comfortable, were clearly designed for observation. Privacy screens could be overridden at any time for medical emergencies, and their communications were restricted to approved channels. We're specimens now, Ethan muttered after their first week of constant tests and examinations. Lab rats for corporate science. Nilera, sitting cross-legged on their shared bed, looked up from the data tablet she'd been studying. Despite the circumstances, pregnancy seemed to have brought subtle changes to her appearance. A softer glow to her skin, a new dimension to her eyes. I've been analyzing their security protocols, she said quietly. The system has vulnerabilities. Ethan moved closer, lowering his voice. You're thinking of leaving? They'd hunt us across the galaxy. Not if we had leverage. Her eyes glittered with unexpected determination. I've discovered something. In their research database, Ethan, we're not the first. First what? Human Australia conception. There have been other cases, at least 7 documented instances in the past 30 years. All carefully hidden and studied. Ethan felt cold anger spreading through him. And the parents? The children? Nalara's expression hardened. The records are incomplete, deliberately so. But I found financial traces, payments to families who agreed to indefinite research participation. Those who refused. She didn't need to finish the thought. We need to get this information out, Ethan said. The Federation has laws against forced biological experimentation. The corporation has already constructed a narrative. They'll claim we volunteer for the research program. Nalara's hand moved to her growing abdomen. But there's someone else we need to consider now. The reality of their situation settled over them both. This wasn't just about escaping corporate control. It was about protecting their child from a life as a research subject, an anomaly to be studied rather than a person to be loved. We'll need help, Ethan said after a long silence. Someone on the inside. Nilera nodded slowly. I believe I know who we can approach. Dr. Lyra Sato had been conducting the majority of Nalara's prenatal examinations, and unlike most of the research staff, she'd shown genuine concern for Nalara's well-being beyond the scientific data her pregnancy provided. After careful observation, they decided to take the risk of confiding in her. What they're doing is wrong, Dr. Sato whispered during a routine exam, after Ethan had explained their situation. It violates every ethical standard I was taught. Will you help us? Nilera asked, her normally composed voice betraying a hint of desperation. Dr. Sato hesitated, fear and resolve battling across her features. My contract has 100 non-disclosure clauses, but none of them outweigh the Hippocratic Oath. She drew a deep breath. There's a supply shuttle arriving tomorrow. I can arrange for you to be on it when it leaves. But the next morning, everything changed. Nilera woke in severe pain, doubled over and gasping. Something's wrong, she managed, her skin paling to an alarming gray-blue. The baby. Ethan hit the medical emergency button without hesitation, all thoughts of escape temporarily forgotten. Dr. Sato arrived with a team of specialists, their expressions grim as they rushed Nilera to the medical center. The pregnancy is progressing at an accelerated rate, Dr. Sato explained to Ethan as they monitored Nalara's vital signs. The hybrid nature of the fetus is causing unexpected developmental patterns. She's essentially experiencing a full-term labor at just 14 weeks. Will they survive? Ethan asked, his voice raw with fear. I don't know, Dr. Sato admitted. This is unprecedented territory. Director Thors arrived shortly after, his clinical interest in the medical crisis making Ethan's blood boil. Document everything, he ordered the medical team. This data is invaluable. As Nalara's condition worsened, their escape plan seemed increasingly impossible. How could they possibly flee with a newborn, especially one that might require specialized medical care? But staying meant condemning their child to a life under corporate control, a subject rather than a person. The decision was taken out of their hands when, in the midst of Nalara's labor, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Proximity alert, one of the technicians announced. Federation vessels entering orbit. Thor's face darkened with anger. Who authorized Federation presence? We have jurisdiction here. The answer came in the form of armed Federation officers storming the medical center minutes later, led by a stern-faced commander who immediately placed Thor's under provisional arrest. This facility is being investigated for violations of the Interspecies Medical Ethics Act, the commander announced. All research activities are suspended pending review. In the chaotic aftermath, Dr. Sato approached Ethan with an explanation. Before helping them escape, she'd taken the precaution of sending an anonymous data package to Federation authorities, detailing the corporation's unethical practices. Nalara, still in the throes of labor, seemed barely aware of the tumult around her. Ethan stayed by her side, his hand firmly in hers, as she fought through pain unlike anything she'd been prepared for. "Don't leave," she gasped, her fingers tightening around his with surprising strength. "Never," he promised. "We're in this together now." After hours of struggle, their child entered the world, a tiny being with pale blue skin bearing subtle patterns like his mother's, and eyes that shifted between human hazel and Australia iridescence. Against all medical predictions, both mother and child emerged healthy, if exhausted. "He's perfect," Ethan whispered as the baby was placed in Nalara's arms. "Absolutely perfect." Nalara, her usual composure completely abandoned, gazed at their son with naked wonder. "I never understood," she murmured. "All the poetry humans write about moments like this. I never understood until now." In the days that followed, Federation authorities established a protective order for the family. Astral Minerals faced severe sanctions for its unethical research practices, and Director Thors was removed from his position pending criminal charges. Most importantly, the other human Australia families were located and offered support and protection. "What'll we do now?" Nalara asked as they prepared to leave the facility. Their son, named Theron, meaning hunter of new worlds in an ancient Earth language, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Ethan looked at the small family they'd created against all odds and possibilities. "Something amazing, I think. They said it was impossible for humans in Australia to have children, but here he is. Makes me wonder what other impossibilities are just waiting for someone to try." Nalara smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed her face. The corporation always emphasized efficiency and protocol, the cold calculations of profit margins. But there was never an equation for this. She gazed down at Theron. "For what it feels like to create a new life, a new possibility. Worth the risk?" Ethan asked, gently tracing the now faded laser scar on his back. "Every moment," she answered without hesitation, "and worth all the risks yet to come." 1 month later, as they stood on the observation deck of a Federation diplomatic vessel bound for Earth, Ethan held Nalara and Theron close as they watched the stars streak by. They had accepted positions as Federation ambassadors, tasked with establishing a support network for hybrid families throughout the galaxy. "I once believed that emotions were evolutionary inefficiencies," Nalara mused, watching Theron's tiny hand grasp her finger. "That logic and protocol were the only reliable guides." "And now?" Ethan asked, though he could see the answer in her eyes. "Now, I understand that some things cannot be calculated. They must be felt." She turned to face him fully. "The laser blast you took from me that day, it changed everything. For both of us," Ethan agreed, pulling her closer. "Sometimes the greatest risks lead to the most remarkable destinations." Together, they faced forward toward Earth and beyond, a family defined not by biological probability or corporate designation, but by the choices they'd made and the love they discovered. A a new kind of family for a galaxy that suddenly seemed filled with far greater possibilities than anyone had imagined.